start by first expressing my gratitude and thanks to all the executives here. So thank you so much for joining us today. You know, uh, all of us today, were living in very unique circumstances. COVID-19 has disrupted a normal way of life. You know, things that we took for granted, suddenly all of those things have gone away. And we fundamentally are looking at a new normal. Now, in this new normal for the businesses, resilience has become very important. It has acquired center stage. Now, if you look at the dictionary, resilience is about coming out of difficulties. But for businesses, it's a lot about when you look at this next normal, you adapt to it, but also how do you serve the customers in this new normal? How do you create sustainable businesses in the new normal? So with this esteemed panel today, I would explore some of the things which they are doing, the strategies which they are adopting for their businesses, and collectively learn how all of us can uh, share, take away some of those learnings and use for our respective businesses. So let me do this. Let me first start by asking you, Dr. Karthik, you are in the pharmaceuticals business. That's something that matters to all of us. So share with us, what are you seeing in terms of the new normal and the adaptability which is necessary for businesses to continue?
So thank you, Mr. Abhishek, and thanks for this opportunity. I think as the previous speaker from KPMG was mentioning, healthcare is one industry where we have seen that with the pandemic, there is a lot more adaptation of digital ways of availing services. I think that growth of digital transformation has been more pronounced in healthcare, in comparison with possibly many other industries. So what businesses have done is broadly, if you look at healthcare, you would see businesses which are predominantly B2B or businesses which are predominantly B2C. Let me first talk about the B2C businesses, which are primarily the e-health companies. Most e-health companies prior to the pandemic were used to specialize in only one stream. Either they used to be dedicated online pharmacies, or they used to be dedicated teleconsultation companies, or there were some companies who were specifically focusing on lab investigations being ordered online. What we saw as a trend, and this is, I think, what we have seen as an overall consolidation in the industry, is the industry used to be led by about 4 large players, 1mg, PharmEasy, I see PharmEasy there, MedLife, NetMeds. But we never ever thought that somebody like Apollo, which is a traditional healthcare service provider, somebody like Amazon or Flipkart would actually take online health so seriously. And I think that's what is a trend that we really, really saw coming up in the first 3 months of the lockdown itself. Now, what it led to is that companies, all of these, the first 4, I would say, torchbearers or front runners in the e-health space, were primarily banking on online pharmacy as a revenue. Over 90% of top line used to come only from pharmacy sales, though they did have lab services and teleconsultation services. They never really gave much importance to growing those from a revenue perspective. But what the new normal helped us understand is that it is important to get the share of wallet of the same consumer. It's the same patient who is coming there to buy medicine. But prior to buying medicine, there are a few steps that the consumer has already been through. Now, what are they? First, the consumer has gone to a doctor. The doctor has done a diagnosis, given a prescription. Now, that prescription has a few medicines, sometimes has a few lab tests. But as an organization, the first 4 players that came in never ever focused on developing consultation and lab services first. They actually put money out in terms of only delivering medicines. So therefore, the amount of money they used to burn on marketing to actually gather more customers and to actually get daily orders was much higher in an online pharmacy model. So therefore, what changed as a trend is that companies realized that if my primary offering to the market is consultation, with that consultation, I can get the same consumer on my platform to also avail lab service and pharmacy from me on the same platform, rather than having to spend more money in acquiring customer for a prescription generated by a doctor outside my platform. So that's the first revelation that came out from the, I would say, during the pandemic time. And therefore now you see that there is kind of a change of focus where the marketing money is now being spent more on driving more consultation traffic, which is more sustainable to the business, which will retain consumers also on the pharma side and on the lab side. The second major change that we saw, and I think again I go back to the KPMG presentation just made, was the cost of operation. All traditional e-health businesses, from a operations perspective, used to actually source medicines from pharma manufacturing companies. They used to create something called fulfillment centers, which is very similar to many other e-commerce players. And the cost of managing a fulfillment center from an operation cost perspective used to be extremely high, which is where we saw Amazon coming in and disrupting it, where what Amazon did is they very smartly partnered with one of the large established branded retail chain called as MedPlus. MedPlus, I'm sure you would have seen in many places. What they did is, instead of spending their money on managing fulfillment centers, they used MedPlus pharmacies as stocking units. What that makes is it brings in two things. One, for a new consumer who is for the first time using an app to buy medicine, he does not have a trust associated with that brand. But if you now bring MedPlus as a partner, he already has a prior experience of walking to a MedPlus store, purchasing some medicines there. He also possibly has experience that they maintain cold chain product like insulin. Some things need to be kept in a fridge. Some medicines need a proper cold chain. Some medicines can be kept outside in ambient temperature, but outside sunlight. So he has seen it. He knows that, yes, I do get quality medicine from this store. Now, if I order from the Amazon app, I know that it is coming from this store. So I know that I get good quality medicine. So they adopted the omni-channel way of actually getting to the market, which we have seen is actually enhanced trust. And therefore now the traditional guys, the 1MGs, etc., they are now getting back to seeing that, okay, can I also look for a partner similar to MedPlus, right? So that's the second trend we are seeing. I think broadly, last part, and I will hand on to the next speaker, is the industry is moving towards consolidation. So therefore we see that there will be possibly only 3 or 4 large players who will have more than 80 to 90% of share in this space. But most of them will focus on what we call a unified storefront, where they will offer consultation service, lab service, and online pharma service in one, where a consumer would prefer to add, if required, all 3 services into one cart and checkout. So that's the way that we are seeing how consumer behaviors and preferences are changing.
Wonderful. So, Dr. Karthik, you mentioned about platforms, and you mentioned about omni-channel. Now, when I think about that, I think, and you mentioned about share of wallet. So merely, if you think about like lifestyle, I think you are actually kind of in a sweet spot of all of this, right? And you're leveraging at this point some of the established platforms which are available. So when you think about the post-COVID world, what do you think, how do you think things changing? Or what do you think are the learnings from today that would continue to apply in the future?
Yeah. So perhaps pandemic created 2 things for us, right? Lifestyle, to be honest, is a traditional organization with 82 stores and present in 45 cities today. And e-commerce is something we started about 3 years back. Now, for about 2 years, we were always, discussing internally that how do we become an omni-channel retailer at scale, right? And that required tech and digital integration at scale again, right? And we ended up doing, let's say, digital boot camps, base camps to get a change in the organization itself, right? How do people start embracing digital and start thinking digital should be core of everything we do, right? Right from starting from customer, how they discover our products, to how they navigate to the stores or online platforms, and they make a purchase. To an extent, how do we make the post-purchase experience beautiful as well? Now, pandemic, so to speak, made digital transformation, which was looking difficult. Everybody started saying, yes, let's go digital now, right? And digital would be, 1, how do we increase footfalls to the store? Second, how do we increase e-commerce sales? So that is the number 1 thing that pandemic, so to speak, changed the mindset of everybody that digital is the next way. But everybody was talking, now it's time for action. And then in a jiffy, in few months, we had a web page set up for every store. While we had an e-commerce presence, in no time, in 2 months, we had 82 store pages built. The inventory was flowing in of every store into the web page. WhatsApp became active. GMBs became active with local store inventory, because the matter of fact is we have inventory at store, we have inventory lying at warehouse, and both has to be sold, right? And that is what happened, right?
Oh, yes.
Which company, what?
Yes. So Mir Irfan is actually at Lifestyle. He leads digital marketing initiatives there.
So yeah. So perhaps that's the first thing that now what's happening is when consumers don't want to walk into the store, the walk-ins have reduced, and whoever is walking in, the conversions are higher. The discovery for us has become seamless for stores near me, for brands, what we trade, 250 odd brands, and also the categories we trade in. So that's one transformation which has happened for stores. And for e-commerce, yes, now we are not a marketplace like how others are, right? We are curated fashion, so it was important for us to have our own customers who don't buy at store to buy online. Again, that's where marketing automation started coming into picture, and that's when we were sitting in a thought of one customer view, that we would want to know a customer who's buying in store or buying online. We want to know more about that customer, stitching the data together, making that golden record, and then trying to personalize everything the customer wants. Because today customer does not want to spend more time at the store, nor they want to spend more time online, because of course the packets are coming home, etc. So vis-a-vis, what happened now is, again, with pandemic, we are now able to stitch the data to communicate more better to our customers. So in a way, it helped in digital transformation for us to evolve into a journey where we're talking about one inventory view, that how do we integrate the inventories of both store and online, and second, how do we know our customers better, which we call it as one customer view. So these are the two things which definitely shaping up.
That's wonderful. Now, digital transformation definitely in today's scenario is extremely crucial. Let me now go to Ramneek. You actually, so Ramneek, you're building Lenskart, and you actually started digital, and then you went omni-channel. So when you look at the post-COVID world, from your standpoint, what are the changes you're seeing, and what do you think is the way businesses should respond to these changes?
So from our perspective, what we are seeing is that there is a lot more intent from the customer to now purchase online and complete the full journey online. So buying glasses online, there has always been some natural friction points. Like as an example, he had bought glasses at Lenskart, and thanks for that. But I'm sure that while most of us here are wearing glasses, we know the size of the shirts that we are wearing, but we don't know the size of glasses that we are wearing. So that has been a huge friction point, along with prescription and things of those nature. So we have always had tools online where you can take a selfie, and our machine learning algorithm can figure out what kind of glasses will fit you well, what will be more personalized for you. But now what we are seeing is a much more higher adoption of that. And so we are pushing the envelope on that further and further, and allowing you to choose glasses online without any need of any agent or anyone, and B, also try them on their faces virtually without having to worry about stepping into a store necessarily. So that is on the online front, where we are seeing a trend of huge consumer adoption, and that has really helped us in our share of business for online. In terms of offline, we have always had ability for you to book appointments before you go inside a store, or check a store's inventory online before you go there, or get your eye tested at home. So we have always had all these tools available, but what we are seeing is that they are now adopted very well, and most of our walk-ins are now with appointments. Most of them are with customers who have already researched the product online and are just going there to close the deal.
That's nice. I think you're able to bring in transaction closure perhaps sooner now with digital option going up. So now let me go to Sharan Nair, who is the Chief Business Officer at CoinSwitch. So Sharan, your business is entirely digital. you're actually a lot about the new age economy and the new age businesses when we talk about cryptocurrency. Share with us what are you seeing, what is the kind of the impact of COVID, perhaps on a, I think it's a positive one with digital transformation helping you in your business. But share with us, given what you see in your business, are there lessons we can draw in other walks of life?
Sure. Thank you for having me. The first thing I noticed is that I'm the only one wearing a polo shirt, so that made me feel a little weird. Right. So the first thing I would probably do is go back and get a blazer for myself. But coming to the question, right? Like you rightly said, we started a company right in the middle of a pandemic. We launched in India in June, and while we were completely digital, and most crypto companies are digital, but there are two things that pandemic really taught us. One, at first, when the pandemic really started going wider, people stopped investing because they got a little scared, right? People wanted more cash in hand, so they were worried about investments, so markets started falling. But eventually, people got used to the new normal, and then you started seeing a huge uptick, and actually it started reversing. So you would have seen a huge numbers in demat accounts and stocks, as well as more crypto companies coming up, and more people investing into cryptocurrencies during this period, right? I was just telling somebody that in 7 months, we had like 3 million users. So you can imagine the kind of growth that we've seen. Another thing that really, lesson that we learned was that while cryptocurrency is a very complicated subject, most people don't understand cryptocurrencies, right? There are a lot of misconceptions about it, a lot of legal things that people are not clear about it, right? And earlier, the way crypto companies have been in India since 2013. Earlier, the way crypto companies would address this is through physical meetups. They would do a lot of in-person meeting and do that. But this doesn't scale. And when the pandemic happened, you really could not go out there and meet people or organize meetups where you could explain to people what you're doing. So one of the things that clearly helped us achieve is something called a community-led marketing. What that meant was we identified a bunch of people who loved our product. We identified a bunch of people who loved our product. We gave them beta access to the features. We educated them. We told them about crypto. We gave them access to all kind of materials. They had direct access to the team. They could ask questions like, okay. And then these folks would then organize semi-formal, these are our own customers who would then go on to organize semi-meetups in the small cities. These are like tier 3 cities, a lot of these people who would invest wouldn't even know how to speak English. So there was a guy who was doing a meetup in Bhojpuri, there was a guy who was doing meetup in Marathi, right? And every question that they couldn't really answer, they would come to us and say, someone is asking me this, now I don't know what to tell them. And this has really, really helped us grow. On the backdrop that most people might not know that you can't run crypto ads on Facebook, Google, Instagram, nothing. Right? So to get that number without running a single ad and just on the basis of a community-driven marketing has been the biggest lesson. And I think 2021, that is going to be a very major focus. Like educate as many core users that you could and empower them so that they could spread that awareness forward.
That's nice. Community marketing. Let me take you on that, Sharan, and ask a follow-up question. So when you think about like your business is entirely digital, and then you're trying to utilize community marketing as a way. So as you do this, from a customer experience and from a consumer behavior standpoint, what are you really seeing, like the receptivity of the consumers or any other unique consumer behaviors that you're experiencing?
I think the first thing that we really saw is a kind of cult status getting built. It sounds weird, but people started being extremely bullish about what they were holding, right? You go to Twitter today, you try to say something that doesn't make sense, or you say something about against cryptocurrencies, let's say, which didn't really make sense. You would see a bunch of people, actually users, come down and try educating you about it, right? Like a company didn't have to do that. We saw people who defended us on Twitter, our own users, right? Every time things would go wrong, we started saying, so I think a cult kind of followership started coming in for exchanges in India, right? And that's because we were very customer focused in the sense that we we go out to the point of educating customers about the new technologies. We tell them this is what the new technology is coming up, and this is what we are going to introduce, and you would be having access to this, right? That kind of trend I've not really seen in any other industry so far come up, right? Like you wouldn't really see someone talking to a Vodafone. You wouldn't really see people coming down and saying, like, okay, you can't. This is not how telecom industry works, or you don't understand telecom industry. So I think that has been a huge booster for crypto industry today.
Got it. So, Ramni, you touched upon the consumer behavior aspect and how in the post-COVID world or even now, you're seeing consumers' adoption of digital means increasing. So when you see that, is it something that you're seeing across the broader set of businesses, or is this something that you're seeing as an isolated trend? So share with us a little bit in terms of what lessons can we draw from what you are seeing in terms of the consumer behavior in your business and their adoption of digital.
Yeah. So what we are saying is that consumer adoption has definitely gone up, and that is not necessarily just with us, but a lot of different mediums and a lot of different companies. I think the way to go about it is the way you mentioned at Lifestyle, where you quickly adopted to a lot of new channels and tools, and go run with them, because this is the time when consumers are willing to experiment with things. Just to share as an example, we had a small channel of WhatsApp before pandemic started, and what we now see is that has quickly become 5 to 10% of our revenue source, because people are just spending a lot of time there, and it is much more easier than leaving the house, going to store certainly, but more easier even to doing a phone call, where they can pick on and off on a conversation whenever they want, and a conversation goes on for 7 days, so you have got consumer logged in for a long time, and that's a good enough time for people to make up their mind. So channels like these are coming up, and it is really a good time to experiment with them, especially because people are much more willing to experiment with them.
That's wonderful. So Irfan, you mentioned about digital transformation, and one of the enablers of digital transformation is technology, which is fundamentally the vehicle to bring consumer closer to your brand. So when you think about the technology being adapted in your business, share with us what are the key aspects you're looking at as you're building your tech stack to serve your consumers?
Yeah. So again, Abhishek, there are two things here. I think it will interest everybody as well. So one is, again, going back to what I spoke about, one inventory view. That is, we are an omni-channel retailer. So how tech can stitch the inventory of store and warehouse. And for example, if a consumer is here in this area and searches or is looking for, let's say, one of the key brand, right? Let's take, for example, our own private label Melange. So how do we ensure that that person is able to see that kurta is available online for sure, and also it's available when the consumer visits our app, right? On the PTP page, the product display page, we're able to inform the consumer that, hey, look, this product is also available 2 miles away, right? So what are we doing? We're trying to inform the customer that, hey, if you order now, we'll be able to ship the product to you in next 2 hours, right? From the store itself. So that's a beautiful experience what any consumer would want to embrace now. That how can I get the product which I want in next 2-3 hours? And that is an important solve what we are trying to do, that how if the person is wanting this product, we are able to ship as early as possible in next 2-3 hours from the nearest store, or if the person can wait, we can still ship it from the warehouse, right? So that's predominantly the one inventory view model, what the tech should definitely help us evolve. So that's the huge tech dependency what we have. Now the second is one customer view. Going back to what I briefly spoke about, one customer view is, again, it's very important for all retailers, right? All businesses to know that if this is the customer, right? If a customer is buying in store, what he or she buying in the store, and what is the frequency? If he or she is buying online, what is he or she buying and what is the frequency? And to an extent, if we can also stitch the data of service, right? That this customer is more WhatsApp friendly or is more email friendly. So what's happening is you have a golden record of this customer to understand that at what point in time this customer is buying in store or online, and largely that what is her customer touch point interest, that he or she is interested in chat. So don't email, right? So then it becomes easy for marketers to start personalizing communications at scale, whether it could be through push, email, SMS, and then we talk about drip campaigns also, where if you're not able to reach to this customer through push, email, SMS, then we open up to the other Facebook, Google channels to reach that customer, right? So one customer view is something which again is more tech dependent, that you're stitching the data and then you're creating cohorts and start to personalize.
Nice. Dr. Karthik, I'm just going to pick up on what Irfan said. So when you look at the healthcare space, do you see the consumer-facing tech? Irfan spoke about push, email, WhatsApp, the means of engaging customers, right, and having personalization. Do you think that also has a role to play in the healthcare space, where basically the new age apps are fundamentally trying to get appointments as a way to kind of build customer relationships?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's just that consumers look at healthcare a little differently than possibly buying, be it spectacles, be it clothes, apparel. We are still a country where preventive healthcare is not really taken up. Preventive healthcare is where you would actually make things to keep health in a better way, and those preventive health is taken up primarily in those countries where that is reimbursed. But here, typically, it is only when you have a problem is when you seek to go to a doctor or seek medical attention, right? That's the consumer trend in out-of-pocket market like India or India-like markets. So what we have seen are two things. So earlier, for any online health company, 70 to 80% of consumers used to be consumers who had chronic disease, something which is with the patient for life, like diabetes. So it doesn't get cured. So you'll have to continuously keep buying medicine. But you can still go, like the presentation we saw, you can go shopping from one platform to other and see which platform is offering more discount, but still you have to keep buying. So that is what chronic. There were very few consumers who came to online platform to buy acute medicine. Acute is what you need like now. Now what happened in the pandemic, you may be aware, early on we had some medicines which came from well-known companies in India which had a promise of treating COVID well, right? So Favipiravir was the first medicine which came from Glenmark Pharma. It was released sometime in early May. After that we had Remdesivir, another very important injectable medicine which came for patients who are admitted in the ICU with COVID. But these are medicines that you need urgently because they are injectables and it needs to be delivered to the ICU where a patient is admitted in the shortest span of time. So it created a new category or a business opportunity for e-health companies. So what we launched is we launched something called Express Service. Express Service is similar to, I think, the Costco model which we heard in the KPMG presentation. It's a limited catalog service. You find only very few medicines listed there, but it's a guaranteed delivery in 2 hours flat. Guaranteed delivery in 2 hours flat in limited pin codes. So that worked really well. Now how it also contributed to higher revenue is, in regular service, typically it takes about 48 to 72 hours for a home delivery, where home delivery is free. In case of express service, customers were willing to pay for the express service. So not only did you make revenue without zero discount, we could sell those medicines at MRP, zero discount, and we could also charge for delivery. This was the delivery fee we could charge, which consumers were willing to pay. So we saw that express delivery grew to around 20 to 25% of total revenue contribution, right? So therefore it creates a new category of consumers who want express service for acute medicines with 2 hours assured delivery. Now the caveat here is that what we realized is that this is a sustainable business only if our last mile delivery system and the fulfillment center operation is geared up to consistently maintaining that 2 hour window. Because if we have any deliveries which are extending beyond it is like pizza delivery, right? So 30 minutes or money, is like it's free. So customer expectation was like that. So even a 10-minute delay because of traffic or whatever was actually adversely impacting brand value. So therefore we realized that, okay, limited geography, limited pin codes to our delivery is a great. So express category opened up. Second thing, coming specifically to your question, yes, customer said that now I am unable to walk into hospital. I'm afraid. If I go to hospital, there are COVID wards. I don't want to walk. So therefore, can you create categories within consultation? Earlier, and I'll tell you what I just meant. Earlier, e-consultation meant just a general practitioner. I can see an MBBS doctor or an MD doctor who's like a general physician. Any problem I have, I can discuss. But now you needed specialists. So therefore, what it led to is specialty categorization within teleconsultation, which we started offering. So you want a cardiologist, we have cardiology specialty created within teleconsultation. You want diabetologist, you have that created. Broadly, cardiac and diabetes contribute to 70% of traffic actually. And then dermatology, mental health, because people are working from home. Psychiatric consultation, mental health consultation grew significantly, almost 60% growth we saw in that category. So mental health became a specialty offering, and then dermatology, and then other routine cough and cold type of thing. So therefore, broadly, if you see, there was a 600% growth in teleconsultation as a business, purely in the first 6 months of the lockdown. And now that is kind of stabilizing. So, in a nutshell, if I were to summarize, creation of a new category called express delivery service with 0 discount and additional fee for delivery, with 2 hours flat delivery in limited pin codes, and creation of specialities within teleconsultation actually led to, I would say, the growth of the business and the sustenance of the business.
Amazing. So until a few months back, when we used to think about express delivery, we would think about food, grocery. It's amazing how far we have come over the last 10 months, where you can actually get critical medicine delivered within 2 hours period. That's a really amazing story. So one of the things, just to kind of touch upon a different aspect, one of the things which I'm saying consistently is all of you are in sort of direct-to-consumer businesses where you're trying to build a relationship directly with the consumers. And in a way, I like to believe that it would allow you to create a more sustainable business on a move-forward basis. So let me go to you, Ramnik, and ask this question, which is, when you think about this steadily growing niche of direct-to-consumers, how are you shaping your business to ensure success on a move-forward basis as we think about this new normal and the world beyond this new normal?
So as we move forward, I think with the adoption of digital media the way it is, be it social media of Instagram, Facebook, etc., or the video apps, they have just taken over. My parents even don't watch cable TV now. They also are completely on Hotstar and all those places. So the attention span of users is getting low and low, and it is also an opportunity for a person. While there's an opportunity that a lot of new users are coming and trying you out, but this is also a time when you have very low attention span to grab their attention and make the value prop extremely clear within 30 seconds. And in our case specifically, we soul search and figure out that what are we known for, what do we stand for. And what we really stand for is amazing, easy, simplified consumer experience for buying glasses and thousands of styles in 30 seconds. And that's where we launched our virtual reality, actually augmented reality solution, where you can virtually try thousands of glasses in 1 minute or more. So this is what our value prop is, and we have been able to get it to the users in 2 to 3 minutes flat out. And I think that is where the unlock lies. If you are able to grab the attention span for few seconds and make it very clear to consumers what you stand for, that is where you'll see a lot of adoption by users at this point.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I think as we think about, I think you touched upon a very relevant point, Ramnik, which is like really shortening this entire process for the customer at different step of their purchase journey. So let me go to Irfan, you, because you spoke about how you're trying to have a unified view of your customers. So share with us some of the tactics or strategies that you're adopting in terms of driving customer experience for your users.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, since you spoke about unified experience, now how first thing is how it is actually created. I think it will interest everybody as well. So the way it is created is you have a CDP platform, which is a customer data platform, where you have to pull in your online, offline data, your service data, and that creates a golden record. Now, as marketers, we still won't be happy with that, right? We also want to know what our consumers are actually browsing, right? That's where you have TMPs who push the browsing data. Then you actually get to know what is your prospect or customer actually browsing as well, so that you can now throw up products what the customer is interested in as well. For example, if the customer is keen on buying jeans, imagine your entire app and website is personalized for that consumer ki aap jeans dekh rahe ho and your app and website is showing you jeans, right? So it's a rich experience. To an extent, since we've created the web pages and inventory showing on store web pages, imagine the same experience is built there. To an extent that your push, email, SMS or the ads you see on Insta, Facebook, Google, everywhere across internet is jeans. So that means the conversion rate would be way higher, right? Whether the customer finally wants to buy on an app or website or in the store. Short, we know that customer wants jeans and you're showing up jeans, right? Because of the browsing data. Plus, if that customer is your existing customer, then if you also know which brand he or she prefers, and you're even personalizing that product to them, then you can expect a conversion higher in the stores as well. But yes, it's not easy as it sounds. It might sound music, but it's not so easy to deliver, right? So that is one. Second, Abhishek, yes, is what I also want to share is an interesting, thing what we actually saw. When the pandemic actually happened, when we beautified our app and website thinking all our offline customers start buying online, right? That was the perception. Sab log online kharidenge. Actually, it did not happen, right? While we did see a growth in online sales, but it did not mean that every offline buyer went ahead and bought everything they wanted on our app and website. It did not happen. Right? Of course, yes, because they have other options to choose from. They would have purchased there, or they were waiting for stores to open. Because even today in India, you have consumers, even of the market research studies, what we've done, people prefer going into stores. And that is actually what happened during festivity, right? When unlock happened, we started seeing, customers buying in the stores and the conversions were getting higher. So pandemic, while it's creating digital and online adoption, it's helping grow online business, but there's still set of customers who still prefer going to the store and picking up what they want because they still like the touch, feel and buy. But yet the discovery is happening on digital. So, and that is the experience we are trying to create. For online, yes, we have evolved over the pandemic, online is becoming important. But for offline, what we've realized is that digital discovery is key. How will you be there? How will you get your share of voice when somebody is looking for the brands you trade, for the categories you're in? All that is mattering us a lot in our catchment areas today.
Nice. Yeah. No. I think the omni-channel bit, I think it's a consistent theme. So, Sharon, let me go back to you and ask, as we think about the future, as we think about coming out of this pandemic and trying to create sustainable businesses, when you think about creating a business for the future, and especially in the cryptocurrency business that you're in, or maybe in general, what are the top things that you believe would be relevant on a move forward basis?
So cryptocurrency is a very sensitive market, right? So two things that really define what we do is, one, we directly deal with customers' money. Like if someone is buying something on a Lifestyle or Lens card, it comes one day late, nobody cares. Most people don't, I believe, right? You send money to buy Bitcoin, it takes 10 minutes to not reflect in your wallet, things go wrong, right? Customers get on social media and start creating all sorts of complaints and stuff like that. A couple of things that we realized that is very specific to crypto industry, we realize is that the way forward is, one, we wear multiple hats. Like you can't really even compare us to a Zerodha, for example, because, for example, one, we have to wear a hat of a regulator ourselves, that's the first thing we had to define, because there's no, cryptocurrency markets are not regulated in India. So you had to play a role of a self-regulator. You had to say, okay, we're going to take KYCs. You had to be careful about what kind of coins you're listing on your platform. Like, for example, if a share tomorrow goes IPO, NSE BSE would list it and then you can just sell it. But I had to be extremely careful about which tokens I had on my platform. I had to do my due diligence on the companies that were listing those tokens. If you guys are familiar with ICO scams that are happening, right? So one, building a regulatory framework wasn't honest on us as of today. Like, how do we go about it? That's the first thing. Second thing is educating the users became a very primary goal for us. Like, I think we're more of educators than we are of a crypto company today. So, and most of our focus, most of our companies that have raised funds, entire focus has just been on educating users, right? And the byproduct of that education is selling cryptocurrencies to them. So for us, it's one, because we are at the beginning stage of building an entire industry that has never been seen before. Our focus is two things: regulations, how to figure out how do you build the best practices around it, and second is how do you educate more people about what you're getting into.
Wonderful. Now, let me take the same question to you. When you think about the future, what are the top 2 or 3 things that you believe would be most relevant to building sustainable business?
If you look at COVID in general, what you'll see is that it has just acted as an accelerant, where it has sped up the trends which were already going, be it cryptocurrency or anything else going online and things of those nature. So it has really not acted as something which will change any trend line, but it has acted as an accelerant. So I think the things which consumer value long term, which is having enough and great merchandise, what you are doing with your unified view of inventory, or getting personalized ads so that I don't see irritating ads which are not relevant to me? Or is it about making the offline experience, though it is very important for touch and feel of the customer, but making it more and more smoother and faster and easier for me to discover products? Those are the things that will continue to happen, and those are the things that we are seeing increased adoption of by different companies. But as far as consumers are concerned, they always wanted them, they had always been there. We are just reaching there faster.
Got it. Irfan, same question to you. What are the top 2 or 3 things that you think would be relevant on a move forward basis?
Yeah, 2 things definitely. See, because of pandemic, of course, most of the businesses like ours, achieving top line is dream now, and securing bottom line is another unlock for all of us. Of course, yes, number 1 is how do we start regaining that business what we have lost for a year. That's critical. So what are the building blocks is something we all have to discover. Of course, digital will play a key role. So yes, digital is becoming important because of the adoption it has now, right? Everybody has a mobile in their hands. Internet is penetrated everywhere. So how do you make yourself available when the customer or prospect is looking for you as a business or as a brand or as a category, wherever we are into? And second, of course, is when I talk about retail, because the inventory what we had did not suit the pandemic era, to be honest, right? We are an aspirational brand, so we had our fashion more related to events, to occasions, right? So everybody stopped buying formals, suits, the kurtis what we had procured. Now nobody is buying all of that, right? So, and overnight you can't just keep having all work from home collections or essentials. It's not possible, right? So the second thing is how do we now, start creating, fashion which now consumers want, right? It is now a far-set dream that people would immediately start buying for weddings or parties or for the different life stages. Let's say a job interview or for the office parties or going to offices itself. So the inventory unlock is also becoming very, very critical for retailers now, including the price points. So I think digital, how do we unlock that for our prospects and customers, and second, the inventory itself.
Well said. Dr. Karthik, same question to you.
Sure. I think in our case, it is about availability and delivery of the medicine or service in the promised time. customers never want to come and say that they search for a medicine or search for a service and it says out of stock. So availability is super critical to retain consumer. Second is, I think, just be mindful of the changing trend. So stay relevant. That's the way I would say. So staying relevant is very critical, because what was the normal is actually not the normal for online businesses anymore. So broadly, in two simple words, these are the two things: be aware, make sure products are available, services are available, and stay relevant.
Excellent. So we're seeing some consistent themes when we think about the future. One is the ability to serve the customers effectively, whether it be in terms of education, whether it be in terms of having relevant merchandise, whether it be in terms of the delivery of service, or whether it be in terms of making sure that critical stuff is available to the customers quickly. We're also seeing a trend in terms of using technology to be able to serve the customers well. So before we wrap up, I want to open up and see if anyone had any questions for the panel here.
What's the most effective channel to reach out to the customers? Have you observed?
Yeah. So what we've seen is, of course, the digital media itself, right? While print TV, the adoption did improve in this pandemic, right? But what we've seen is digital as a media, especially the way we orchestrate campaigns is more on prospecting, retargeting, and remarketing. So fundamentally, the Facebooks of the world, Google of the world, and DoubleClick, it's a personalizing platform. So these three platforms are definitely working in terms of the efficacies, what we call as return on advertising spends. So that's definitely working, but what is important is how do you stitch in that's the paid media, but how it's important to stitch the earned media, which is the marketing automation platform itself, right? Once you get an install, you have to nurture that install, right? So that that person does not uninstall your app. So that's where marketing automation platforms help you to drip campaigns of email, SMS, push email, SMS. So this media is put together is helping us drive efficacies.
Not with respect to acquisition, but with respect to your existing CRM channel. What would be your most effective thing?
It's
All of you
push, app and web push, especially the app push.
PMs. We've done the app push and also the web push, if you call it that way. What we've done is now customers have gone to, let's say, an Apollo Hospital website, a Fortis Hospital website, etc. So we've run campaigns there that says that, okay, after finishing your consultation, here is an offer for you. So both app and web push is what we've tried. What we've also now started doing is the cashback and the coupon codes. So for repeat customers, we study repeat buying behavior. And for such customers, we're giving coupon codes and referral codes where they can now accrue points. So earlier, those things were not there on platforms like health platforms. So now they get like points, loyalty points, which they can redeem for discounts on medicines, free additional discounts on medicine, test, etc.
I'll answer that in two parts. First one is more on customer acquisition part, where I know you are more interested in the transaction part. But on the customer acquisition side, I would say the golden rule always go where the consumers are. And one thing that was surprising for us is we have never advertised on Doordarshan. But when Ramayana and Mahabharata were on the top of their game, that's the first time we advertised on Doordarshan. And we saw amazing adoption at that point. And that was also an interesting time for us because, of course, everything was locked down. That was top of April-May time period. And we couldn't go out and, of course, shoot a commercial. So what we did is we WhatsApped our customers, which comes to the transactional point. We simply, as an experiment, just sent a WhatsApp to the customers, asked them that, hey, would you like to share your story with us of, how we helped you in lockdown by getting you a pair of glasses? Because though one day delay doesn't matter to people whose glasses are broken. So, sorry for that. I was holding on to that. So anyways, we got amazing stories of children who now are spending time in front of their screen for their schools, etc. Of mothers who are now working from home, and some people, to our surprise, also send their videos with their house backgrounds. And all we did is we stitched all those testimonies together and put it on Doordarshan, and we got amazing uptake at that time. In terms of transactional, hands down WhatsApp. I would say even better than push notification. Because if you look at the open rate, right now it is 100% in WhatsApp. I don't know what it will be in 6 months from now or 1 year from now when they open up for marketeers more and more. But right now, hands down WhatsApp.
I think I agree with him on that. So for us, it's been Telegram.
But with respect to the specs coming one day late,
That I agree with him.
so he can delay his cryptocurrency transfer for a year.
So we for us, better than push notification works sending out a notification on Telegram. So we have a community of close to like 30,000 people on our Telegram, so active traders, right? And they like to talk to other traders. So they come together, and that's the best place for us to put do you want to update your bank account details? You just put it, and then you see people doing that immediately. People giving you feedbacks as well. Something is broken in your app, they come back immediately and tell you, this is broken, this isn't working fine, like get it fixed and things like that. Push notification is the second best, and emails have been like the third.
Wonderful. Any other questions?
Yeah, so we've been talking about the effectiveness of the channel. So a level below or up is what are the key matrices to become the most effective channel? For instance, in customer acquisition, at the first level, are you looking at only the installs, because now I'm talking about only the digital channels, or web registration, or when you are making a channel saying it's the most effective, are you looking downstream conversions?
Yeah, the KPIs, so to say, yes, if you're talking just about app, of course, number one is if you're acquiring installs, that how many installs and what is the CPI. But again, the buck does not stop there. You know, having n number of installs and nobody converting is of no value to the business. So yes, the important KPI is the conversions itself and the cost per transaction from whichever media we are driving those installs from, whether it is because marketing automation happens next, but where we are acquiring from, let's say Google, Facebook, wherever those channels could be, and how many installs, what is the CPT, and that's important. Cost per transaction is critical.
So have you guys, the idea to understand was, have you guys also moved from looking only at the CPI as a input metric from a gateway, or
It's downstream.
entirely down to the
Yeah,
funnel now in the last two steps where I see being added to the cart or payment complete?
Yes. So it's all downstream now. CPI is very softcore metric now. So we go into CPI, then we get into the CVRs, then the CAC, then we also look at the MAC by MAU rate. That is, how many customers buy on app and how many are active. So what is that percentage? So that's important to know if the customers are, if at all, active or not on the app. And then the retention itself, right? If we continue to acquire new installs and it's a leaky bucket, we're losing, and we're not getting repeats. So that's the downstream. Are we getting repeats? Again push, email, SMS. That's the drip campaign I was talking about, the CRM. How do we use marketing automation at scale to retain that customer and have him or her buy more frequently? So that repeat rate is important, and of course the other metrics like what is the churn, how do you reduce the churns, how do you increase repeats, and it gets into AOV, so it goes on.
So cost per install has always been a base metric, sort of a control metric for us, that grow revenue by this much by having CPI not cross this. It has never been a prime metric for us. But after that is when things get interesting, because once the guy is installed, it is not like, at least for our business, it is not like they're going to buy glasses right now just because we showed them a Facebook ad or an Instagram ad. It is something where you register in minds of customer, and then being omni-channel, it gets more complicated. That whether they go to a store 10 days later, 15 days later, or they are just scrolling through 100 feet road and they end up going into the store because they remembered your ad, and then they end up buying there. So those are the more complicated and interesting matrices that we spend bulk of our time in. Like, what is the buying rate within 7 days, 30 days, 1 year from now, from the time they saw the ad and did that install, and which channel did they bought on, and how do you stitch all of that together? So that is where we spend max of our time, and that is where we see our most of the improvements driven via that. And of course, you cannot wait for an year just for an install to show up and build funky matrices around it. But what we do have is models which tell us that these many percentage must buy within these many days, otherwise it's a crap install and things like that. So within a day you get to know whether you have spent it at the right place or the wrong place. But for it to get fully matured, of course, it takes time given all the channels which are available.
So then the attribution of it becomes channel-wise that more important for you.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that is where most of the retailers struggle with, because when a customer is walking in, what is their identity and how is it linked to the online identity? Whereas in our case, we know the name of every person who's practically walking in, and we have those details stitched together right now at this level of maturity in business.
I think one more thing I want to add. See, online is pretty evolved and we all know how to measure and how to optimize. One of the pressures is actually building on offline. Now the expectation is if you're moving the monies of print and TV or BTL to online, do the same thing what you're doing for e-commerce. And luckily today it's food for thought. I mean, the way we are evolving, a lot of retailers are evolving is, especially while over years we are able to track how many walk-ins do happen to the store from digital channels. Now we are working on projects where we'll eventually be able to track if transactions have happened in the store as well, and what is the CPT. So the point I'm making is what we are doing for online, which is pretty evolved over, let's say 5-10 years now. Now the expectation for offline is same now. If you're doing digital marketing, do it the same way how you do for e-commerce. Yeah, but it's possible today. That's the beauty of.
I think it's slightly different in our case because we can't run ads, so CPI, CPM, a lot of these things don't matter, like doesn't affect as much. The other tricky part with us is because we're like in the business of stocks, right? You buy a stock from Zerodha, you buy a stock from Grow. There's no product differentiation, right? So the number one metric that we chase is how often has a user referred other user. That's our number one metric, because you may keep buying, right? But for us, the most important thing is like, when is this user going to refer someone else? And that's the number one metric that we chase. How do we make it so easy for him to refer someone else is our growth story.
So for us, 70% of customers used to be chronic disease prior. Now it's become 90%. So we're seeing that, okay, let's focus on chronic. That's going to be the sustainable one. We are looking at AOV. That was super critical because, to be very honest, pre-pandemic, the AOV used to be in the range of around 3K for a chronic disease customer who used to come almost every 45 days to buy. That fell to 900 rupees in the early part of the lockdown. So it's a significant cause of worry, which is where we moved to a unified storefront, that how can we sell more to the same consumer. So I think our focus on KPIs have changed while keeping AOV as the prime. It has changed to repeat buys from the total install base. We're not really spending more money on more installs. Second is basically we've started the recommendation engine. Because by type of medicine that one searches on the platform, we know what disease the person has. So there are many other, if I were to take example of diabetes, somebody is trying to buy diabetes medicine, we know the same person needs a sugar-free, same person needs a glucometer, same person needs a diabetes protein powder, etc. So we try to sell more. So we're looking at share of wallet per consumer and what is the conversion from recommendation buy or recommendation. These are the two things we're looking at.
Sorry, just wanted to add one more. Am I? Yeah, thanks. With 90% chronic customers and 45-day repeat cycle, I'm just wondering, have you tried subscription models, or that is something you are experimenting with?
Yes, we have experimented with it. Honestly, haven't reached a steady state at all.
Okay.
Early stage, but we have started experimentation.
And adoption gives you an idea of whether it will be successful or?
Yeah, so in the first about 3 or 4 months of experimentation, it's been around, say, 10%, I would say. Of 10% of total repeat consumer pool who adopted to it.
Thank you.
Only just to add to that, I also come from the same industry, which is digital healthcare. So for us also, chronic, of course, in terms but is also in terms of online doctor consultations. So that the repeat is quite high at the. So if I compare it with hospitals on ground, we're talking about all of us put together in a year visit a hospital not more than 3 times a year. Whereas when I talk about online doctor consultation platforms or online digital healthcare platforms like ours, which is Medibuddy, we see people coming back almost 9 times a year. So subscription, yes, makes sense. I think it was one of the products that healthcare was never associated with a subscription model, because that is how the category was built. And now it is slowly moving towards saying that I am at home when I have a subscription. And it has to be like how doctor said, that it has to be built across departments and across SKUs. That is how the subscription also works. You enter a lot of departments into it, because it's not that I am having some issue in a specific department versus somebody at my home has something different. So that's how it is built, and subscription is the key focus for us as well, and it's going to be at least for the next 5 to 10 years.
So in the interest of time, I think we can take up rest of the questions and follow-up conversations over lunch. But I sincerely want to thank all of you, Dr. Karthik, Irfan, Ramni, and Sharon, for sharing with us the wonderful insights, things you're doing for your businesses, and things that are broadly applicable to the entire industry. So thank you so much for being a part of this panel. Appreciate it.
Thank you.